Young Editors. Now, here's Emerson College Junior, Rick Brown.
Hi, and welcome to the Young Editors. I'm Rick Brown. Whether we like it or not, the invasion is on. Our jobs, our schools, and even our homes are being invaded by those whirring, clacking, silicon-filled computers. And for better or worse, they're becoming a dominant force in the way we'll live in the so-called information age. We bank with automated teller machines, wear digital watches, and even can listen to music that is generated by computers. But if you're one of the many people who is suspicious about these mysterious boxes taking over our lives, what you'd like is some straight talk and simple answers to your computer questions. Well, in the next half hour, you'll get just that as the Young Editors examines the role of computers in society with a man who is an expert and an author in the field, Mr. Jack Rochester. But before we meet the author of The Naked Computer, I'd like to introduce the 4 high school newspaper editors who will lead our discussion this week. From the BMC Durfee High School newspaper, The Hilltop, we have co-editors Beth Ann Schroeder and Rodney Mauricio. And joining us this week from the Marblehead High School Headlight newspaper, co-editors Erica Spaberg and Ted Ferreira. As always, the Young Editors are backed up in the studio audience this week by their newspaper staffs, and those young people will be asking questions later on. Now, please welcome this week's guest, high-tech writer and the author of the new book, The Naked Computer, Mr. Jack Rochester.
Hi, Rick.
Mr. Rochester, thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here.
We'll give you 2 minutes to get yourself comfortable, and then we'll be back to see if we can all become a little bit more computer literate when the Young Editors returns right after this. Welcome back to the Young Editors. Our guest this week is high-tech writer and the author of a new book called The Naked Computer, Mr. Jack Rochester. The South Dakota native's fondness of electronics led him to the high-tech publishing business in California. Mr. Rochester edited college textbooks and released a manual on word processing 6 years ago, at a time when skeptics scoffed computerized typing as a thing that would never catch on. High-tech publishing brought the Cal State University graduate to Boston 5 years ago, and it's where he now makes his home. Lifelong observations of computers provided the information for this new book that Mr. Rochester has co-authored. The whole idea behind The Naked Computer, in Mr. Rochester's own words, is to introduce some of the funnier and more interesting stories about computers, and maybe even poke some fun at them, so that we'll all be a little bit less afraid of those digital devices. Mr. Rochester, for some reason or not, whatever it is, a lot of people are afraid of computers taking over an increasingly large part of our lives, whether it's that 1984 is around the corner and Big Brother's on the way, or job displacement, something. What do you think, from your insight, why there's such resistance to the computer age?
I think we have an innate fear of machines to begin with. They're strange, awesome creatures, and I think particularly with computers when they're silent and just sit there and hum, we don't know what's going on inside, and I think we all like to know what's going on inside a machine.
Job displacement is a big thing. There was a statistic in your book that says 25 million people could be out of work within the by the end of the decade because of computers?
Out of work in the jobs they're in now, but probably the computer will generate more jobs and more different and diverse jobs, and plus lead us more toward a society where we don't have to work quite as hard or as many hours as we have to now.
Interesting viewpoint. Okay, let's go to the Young Editors, BMC Durfee and Beth Ann.
Do you think our society is becoming too, not personal and more computerized?
I don't know if a computer depersonalizes society per se. It's the way that it's used. If it's used to take over a function that might have been better done by a person, yes. But remember how you used to hate the bank tellers because they were so cold and indifferent and weren't nice anyway? So what's the difference? Might as well use a machine.
But there are some instances where they do become depersonalized, like the telephone machines. I hate it when you call up to ask for a number and a computer tells you the telephone number. That's the worst thing in the world.
Well, what can I say?
Okay.
It's a real human voice. It's just, it's actually more like a tape recording machine than anything else, where the tape jumps back and forth in a series of numbers and gives you those numbers in the proper order to give you the new telephone number than it is really a computer. Actually, that's one of the least computerized devices that the telephone company uses.
Okay, let's go over to Marblehead and Erica.
There's been much discussion about video games and the addiction children and adults are having with these games. How do you feel about video games?
I think that they have a fun value, but as far as being socially redeeming at this point in time, I don't think they are particularly.
How would you feel about your own children playing video games?
I've got a 10-year-old who I can't pry off the keyboard half the time. Sometimes I wish, and I hope for the future, that we'll have video games that have some educational value beyond just the shoot-'em-ups that we have now. I think that the adventure games where you have to figure out a complex path through a maze or how to use different devices to get treasures or cross crystal bridges or whatever can teach some fundamental skills. If perhaps instead of picking up swords and treasures we were learning math, that might be a nice thing to use a video game for, but that's still in the future. Right now we're still in the adolescent phase.
Is that a recommendation to parents who are looking for computerized games that they could also learn something on the side, their children?
Well, I think, Rick, that you know, coming from my own perspective, at first I had a real aversion to my son playing video games because I thought they were a waste of time. And I realized you might as well do it and get it out of his system and then move on to something more interesting, which he's doing. He wants to learn basic programming and is learning it now.
Okay, interesting. Let's go over to Rodney.
There seems to be a cry across the nation of giving more money to high schools, elementary schools, giving more money to educate the students in computer literacy. Do you think that giving money to students is going to take away from the other courses, the humanities, for instance?
I really don't know. I think we need to learn something about computers. I would hate to see it at the sacrifice of learning art, music, or literature. I really can't
Speculate
answer
on
that.
the role of the computer in the classroom, if you would.
The computer has a great role in the classroom. It can facilitate learning on many, many levels. It's a less threatening educational environment for many children because when you make a mistake, you're not humiliated and embarrassed in front of 29 other kids, and you can try it over again until you get it right. And there's also fundamentally a good thing as far as what we were talking about earlier with Beth about being afraid of machines, because once you learn to master the keyboard or the particular skills that you're working with on the computer, you can feel competent and you're not afraid of the machine, and you can even walk up to an ATM and not be afraid to stick your card in and know you'll get your money and your card back.
Is that okay? Okay, let's go back over to Marblehead and Ted.
Do you feel that with the recent layoffs and bankruptcies in the computer industry that there's a general decline in the computer field?
Gosh, no. This is just a cyclical thing. It happened in 1969-70. It happened again around 78. It happens from time to time. This field has grown at about 5 times the pace of any other field. I interviewed Tom Watson, Jr., whose father founded IBM, and Mr. Watson, Jr., who was responsible really for giving us the computer industry as we know it today. And even he himself says this industry has grown at a pace that I never predicted myself. So yes, we'll see companies go bankrupt. We'll see a lot of changes, what they call the shakeout, if you will. But by and large, I think that we're still seeing a lot of growth. Most companies are experiencing 14 to 30% growth a year, and that's pretty healthy.
Do you think there's a certain decline in areas like the video game industry and certain other fields in the computer industry?
Oh, I sure do. I think we'll move more away from an arcade type of game, more away from a cartridge type of game, to the disc games, which have more complexity and more challenge to them than the more simple games that, just because of the nature of the way the game is designed, it's on a small chip. It can't do as much as what a disc can do.
What about computers in the home? What are we going to see there? Can you speculate on that?
Lots of computers. I think by the time, by 1988, there'll be 50 million computers in this country. That's one, I think, to about every 3 people, something like that, 1 to every 4th person. We have to find more uses for the computer at home. That's been the fundamental problem up till now. When someone sees an ad on television that says this computer has 16K of RAM, that really doesn't tell you what usefulness it has, does it?
Okay. Who else has a question?
I was wondering, do you think that people are using computers, like, not for the reasons that they were designed for, you know, for little things that don't really matter? They're not important enough.
I wouldn't agree with that, no, because I think that any time someone uses a computer for something it wasn't designed for, they learn a new use for it. When computers were first introduced commercially, they were used for counting. They were what we call bean counters. And if no one had ever thought to do something else with them, which the first really major different use was to control a manufacturing process, to coordinate this, that, and the other operations so that they would all function smoothly together. If no one had ever thought to do that, then we wouldn't have had any of the uses that we do today. No one would have ever thought to have used a computer to, in a microwave oven as a timing and temperature controlling device. No one would have ever thought to use a computer to write, to use word processing, or to play games.
Mm-hmm. How about some computer applications that have flopped? There are some notable ones in your book.
I think one of the most interesting ones was the round computer, which was designed to be sort of an elegant computerized adding machine that every time you would try to multiply 3 times 3, it would come up with 10.
Now, why was that?
There was some bug inside the machine, and they never could get it straightened out. They spent millions of dollars developing this machine, and the first time somebody used it, it wouldn't add up to 9. Another interesting computer that flopped was the computer that was they called a snake. It's about 16 feet long, and the signals would travel up and down the snake, and hopefully by the time they got to one end and back to the other, they would have done the correct calculations. It worked pretty well, but it just wasn't, companies didn't have enough room to lay 16-foot computer snakes all over the floor. So that one didn't do too well either.
Okay, we'll have to take a break in the action. We'll be back with Jack Rochester. He will field questions from members of the studio audience when we return. Welcome back to the Young Editors. We are in the studio audience now talking to Jack Rochester about his book. It's called The Naked Computer, and it's got some interesting stories about computers taking over our lives. Who had a question over here? Sure, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sean from Marblehead High School, and I was just wondering, what do you think of teaching the grade school kids about computers? Do you think it's better to teach them at an early age or wait a little longer until they get to junior high?
Oh, the sooner the better. The sooner the better. I think with any language, with any area that we need to learn about, the sooner we learn it, the easier it is to learn. And then that way it becomes an integral part of the rest of our learning experience. We learn to develop relationships, how, if you understand computers at a very early age, then later on when you see them functioning in a situation, you can say, ah, that's because of this and this. So there are fewer mysteries and more knowledge, more information.
You implied that we have to learn about computers. You just said that. Is
Oh,
computer
absolutely.
literacy going to be demanded of everyone?
Well, I hate the term computer literacy. I think it's almost an oxymoron in a way.
What would you rather call it?
Well, I'd rather call it computer competence. I think that we need to feel competent and skillful and confident with computers. I think everyone should learn a little bit about how computers function and work and how they affect our lives. One of the wonderful things that I love to tell people is, remember when you wrote on your Jordan Marsh bill, "This isn't right, do this for me, please, thank you very much, Mrs. Dunham," and nothing ever happens month after month. Well, if you knew that no human being ever saw that statement, that it went into a machine which read your name and account number, and a separate track right beside it, the check went in, and it read the magnetic ink code on the check and just automatically credited your account, then you'd know that you should write the letter somewhere else and that a human being would attend to your problem. These are the kind of reasons that we build up aversions and antagonisms towards computers, and we need to overcome those through computer competence.
Okay. So, hey, Rome over here, one thing that's big about computers, and we're all hearing these days, is computer crime. You speculated in your book that it could add up to about $23 billion a year.
That's right.
Would you talk some more about that?
Well, that's the figure that we came up with. That's the naked computer figure. There's actually no way to know because most computer crimes are never reported. The companies that have internal white-collar crime, as we call it, committed, where an executive or someone who has access to the computer steals money, in some cases salami slices, as we say, slices a little bit off of everybody's, savings account or funds, this way earning hundreds of thousands of dollars without any effort whatsoever. None of these crimes are ever reported because the company's too embarrassed by having it happen. So they say, well, listen, why don't we just forget this, so you give us back the money and you can go back to your job, and we'll leave things as it is. And sometimes the guy says, well, we'll forget it, but I'll keep the money and still go back to my job. How's that?
And they're getting away with that.
Right. The largest computer crime was the equity funding scandal, in which $2.1 billion was defrauded from people who thought they were taking out insurance policies on their lives and in fact weren't.
Some guy had $2 billion in his pocket from computer crime.
Well, several guys, as a matter of fact, right. They fired one of their employees, and he was a little disgruntled, so he went to the Securities and Exchange Commission and reported them.
Incredible. Who has a question over here? Sure, go ahead.
Hi, Mike Fox from Marblehead.
Hi, Mike.
And I was wondering what factors you think should be considered when a family would be looking for a home computer.
I think the first thing you have to think about, Mike, is what you want to do with it. If you have a family with young children, you might want to have some games, some educational types of things. In my experience, I haven't found too many families that sit around the computer at night studying French, but there are some other educational opportunities. Certainly one of the wonderful things to learn to do with a computer is graphics. And with some of the computers today, you can actually design slideshows, cartoon shows, do your own graphics presentations, record them on your video cassette recorder, and play them back like home movies, only they're somewhat more entertaining and creative. If you have older children or kids like us here tonight who have to do term papers, reports, this sort of thing for school, word processing is a super thing to have. If your father is interested in the stock market or is interested in the news, specific kinds of information, has a hobby or an interest that he pursues, you might want to have a computer that has telecommunications capabilities so that you can call up these unique databases that exist around the country and get the specialized information or news that you're interested in. I hate to say that mom is only going to be interested in recipes, but there are other things that mothers are interested in that computers are useful for, and we'll let mom's imagination take over from here.
Okay, let's break some of the, thank you, let's break some of the mysticism of computer terms. You were just talking about databases and bytes and RAMs and ROMs. When you're buying a computer, you should look for memory capability. What are some of the other, a thumbnail sketch?
The first thing you should look for, Rich, is to find a computer that has the software or the programs that you're interested in. The first thing is what your needs are, what your interests are. Find out if the computer has these. In most cases, the software will have an indication on it of whether or not it'll operate on that particular computer and how much memory is required for it to do so. These things are usually very easily solved.
Okay. Who has a question over here? Sure.
I'm John Ginsberg from Marblehead. Hi.
Hi, John.
Hi. A lot's been said about how a lot of families are bringing in computers to their homes and using them for education. How do you feel this is going to affect the teaching status right now? You know, is the computer world going to take over the teaching world?
I think it will augment and complement the teaching world. I recently heard that by 1990 or the year 2000, we're going to have a terrible shortage of teachers again in this country. If computers can aid teachers, take over some of the rote kinds of teaching that they have to do now, free them for more creative teaching, free them to help with special education with children who need extra help, whether because they're too bright or because they're deficient in some way, all the better.
Okay. One of the ways that we found out about computers was this summer from a movie, War Games, and it was just fictitious, but a lot of this nation's defense is based on computers, and you, in your book, pointed out that we've come awful close to some nasty things because of them.
Absolutely true. Well, the first real operating computer was commissioned by the Army to help calculate ballistics trajectories, and in fact, as we say in the book, if you look into any computer's family tree, you're going to find an uncle that was in the military at one point or another.
Because they paid for most of the development.
Obviously so, they still are. The military has always been interested in technology and advancing in this way. I hope that someday we have computers which will simply fight our wars for us so we don't have to risk life, limb, and property when we have an altercation with another country, but we're not there yet.
And there was a story about a measly $1,000 piece of technology that broke down in a $1 billion computer that could have sent off nuclear missiles.
There have been several instances like this where I believe it was a $100 communication device which flipped a circuit at some point and sent a wrong signal down the wire, which indicated that we should go into a red alert. But there were safeguards built into the system, which when double-checked and cross-checked, determined that that really wasn't the case.
Okay, who has a quick question over here? Sure, go ahead.
Okay, Brian Corey from Durfee High School. I was wondering what safeguards are put in the computers other, than the ordinary ones to prevent thefts, and if you yourself have ever been able to break down these safeguards.
If you'll admit it.
No comment. I'll plead the fifth on that one. There are plenty of safeguards built into computer systems. In most cases, when someone breaks into a computer, it's by accident. There was the Dalton gang in New York, a group of teenage boys who were trying to find a Pepsi-Cola computer to tap into so they could have some free cases of Pepsi delivered to the Dalton school. Accidentally got into a couple computers in Canada and messed up some data. This is more common than not. Rarely do we have a war games type of situation where someone actually goes, well, in fact, even in war games, he was looking to get into a game system, not to get into the military computers, but stumbled across what's called a trap door. Every computer has a trap door, which is a way that in case something happens that the people who know how to get into it can't get into it, they have a way around. The biggest problem with computers, computer security, is that people use the names of their kids or their license plate number as their passwords, and those things are always so easy to figure out. If anyone ever found out what my password is, they could get into all my accounts and, and my computer and everything else, because it's all one word. I'm as guilty as the rest.
Okay, we'll have to take a break right now. That will do it for the questioning segment on the Young Editors. We'll be back with a wrap-up for you right after this. Please stay with us. That will do it for us this week on the Young Editors. We have used up all our time for computer questions. We'd like to thank Jack Rochester for coming down and talking to us. Best of luck on the book.
It's nice to be back with the newspaper people again.
And from Durfee, we'd like to thank Rodney and Beth Ann. Good job. And from Marblehead, Erica and Ted. Thank you very much. And we would like to thank you for bringing the Young Editors into your home and making us a part of your weekend. I'm Rick Brown, reminding you we'll be back next week with another edition of our show. We'll see you then.